Today is the day where you see Mathias as a proxy only. I'm the henchman to run the electronics here with a lot of technical help. And I'm also the henchman to present for the OBO Foundry today, what the OBO Foundry is up to and why we think we're the hottest thing since sliced bread for fair principles and ontologies. That is an overstatement, sorry. I sometimes struggle to be serious. So we talk about operationalizing open data principles to evaluate and integrate ontologies. I really hope from the bottom of my heart that many of you have seen this page before. This is the OBO Foundry homepage. The OBO Foundry is a group of people, of ontologists. Some are domain experts, committed to a shared set of principles to build open biomedical ontologies that are open to the public. There is a strive to make these ontologies orthogonal and interoperable. How good that is done is a matter of scientific debate at this point, but it's certainly the intention of the OBO Foundry to follow that. Here are a few dates. The OBO Foundry has been around for a long time. It started in 2006, gosh, that was even before I became an ontologist, and it is grown into a huge group. In the beginning, we are talking about nearly 8 ontologies. At this point, we have 179 active ontologies, 61 inactive ontologies, and 5 orphaned ontologies, so ontologies where we honestly don't even know where the people are. In the future, we really want to work with design principles, use design principles to improve the orthogonality and match in the ontologies and to grow our library of ontologies. I already mentioned that the thing that makes the OBO Foundry is that there are principles that we're working upon and that we request that ontologies who join the Foundry follow. I'm going to discuss some of them later. I just want to, at this point out a few. Some of the terms you will actually recognize if you were here in the first part, like identifiers. Identifiers is a big issue for the OBO Foundry too. Openness. We discussed accessibility, and I expressed my strong support for accessibility. A common format, traceability of verdants. It's really important. I think Asia might have brought that up. I'm not sure. But versioning is really of the utmost importance. Definitions, the ontologies need to have users, and so on. There needs to be maintenance, naming convention, all of the good things. These are really qualities that the OBO Foundry and the people who make the OBO Foundry, which is a whole community, believe to be essential to build ontologies that are reusable, useful to their domains, and provide high quality ontological representation. So I remember the very first OBO Foundry meetings that I joined around 2011 and 2012. There was a lot of talk of, and we will make the principles stricter. And I think stricter is a weird word, but we are seeing now to be more conducive in actually following up that the principles are followed and what it means that those principles are followed. And this is a really important push in the OBO Foundry over the last few years. So the question we're asking ourselves, how can we encourage and monitor the implementation of those principles, which we believe to be crucial? So, and I think there are 4 layers. And I'll start with the bottom because that is really the foundation. And that is the ontologies need to be findable, they need to be accessible, and they need to be openly available. This also touches on the issue of licensing. So even if it's accessible, it doesn't mean that you can reuse it if the license prohibits you from reusing it without, for example, paying for it. In the OBO Foundry, there's no payment. The licenses that the OBO Foundry supports is either giving credit to the original ontology only or nothing at all. So that means that you can actually download the ontology, alter it, change it, upload it to your project. You still need to give credit to the original developers and the original ontology. But I think that is a really important thing. The second step is common formats and tools. The OBO Foundry and the people who work within the OBO Foundry have really accumulated an astonishing amount of tooling that helps us to develop our files, like Robot, which is a tool that really walks you through the entire process of developing, sharing an ontology, reusing patterns, and all of those things. ODK, those are the design patterns, and all kinds of tools that the OBO Foundry provides for its developers, but also for people who want to join in. And then the next level is sharing vocabularies and standards and upper level ontologies. So the thing that I honestly think is the most beneficial is the reuse of relations. I'm personally very wary of relations because people tend to turn every verb into a relation. And then it's very difficult. But this is why the OBO Foundry adopted, and then I really think this is great, adopted the principle that you should reuse the relations from the relations ontology. And it's very easy. I had a few relations in my ontologies that were not there. And the process of getting them added was very easy, but also enlightening because people brought up things that they think could be expressed better so that it's more interoperable. But it was a matter of weeks. So the relation ontology is important. There are the OMO annotation standards. And a recently started thing is the core ontology for biology and biomedicine that provides an upper layer for all kinds of biomedical and biological ontologies. I forgot, well, maybe I mentioned it, but the OBO Foundry is like laser focused on biomedicine and biology. So there are a few fringe ontologies like the document act ontology, which is not per se biological, but which is built to foster use cases in legal affairs related to medicine. Let's see. And then finally, shared design patterns. And at this point, the focus of the OBO Foundry is to share ontology design patterns. Alternatively, and I think Jonathan Bona presented that at ICBO last year, we also need to think about instance patterns because you can one and the same data item, even if you just stick clearly to OBO Foundry ontologies, represent in multiple ways. But right now, the activities to clean up our gig as far as the ontology patterns are concerned. So these are things that are going on now. So I think I pointed out already when we talked about the tools. So the OBO Foundry is not an ontology police on the internet. It's a collaborative network of people who want to share experiences, best practices, and tools. So and standards like the development of COB, of RO, and of OMO. COB is fairly new. RO has been going on at least since 2014. I don't have that for sure, but these are long-standing efforts, actually, probably 20, doesn't matter. We developed infrastructure with tooling Robot. It's really, if you look at that, it is an astonishing tool. I will be talking a little bit more about the dashboard. That is a tool that helps ontology developers to assess how close they are already getting to this idea of heeding all of the principles. And it gives them feedback on, oh, right now you're not doing this. What is the problem? I will see that in a bit, hopefully. And then, of course, we developed, the OBO Foundry developed the OBO principles, and the OBO principles are inspired and took a lot of inspiration from the FAIR principles when those came out. So the publication of the FAIR principles really triggered us to go back, look at the OBO principles, see do they fit up, and consider changing some of them. And then most importantly, because this is ultimately what it's all about and what a conference like this is all about, it's building a community. It's about bringing together the people who have an interest in putting biomedical ontologies to work, being efficient in putting them to work, and getting them to a state where they are resources that we all can be proud of, but that also we all can use successfully. So this is only a tiny selection, and these are not all of the problems that we often encounter, but we still think we still see a few problems regarding OBO ontology. So there's still a lot of variation in which kind of properties you use. You have issue tracker items, then sometimes you use RDFC also to link GitHub tickets to classes that need work. IO sometimes uses term editor, sometimes uses the Dublin core contributor, and so on. Sometimes people use the Dublin core date, sometimes they use a different date format. So there is still quite some variability. Versioning habits are still very diverse across the OBO Foundry. If you use Robot, your versioning gets done in a certain way, but you don't have to use Robot. So I'm one of the guilty people who have weird versioning habits, and I'll change that eventually, I promise. So the cross references and the mapping are not represented similarly, so they're not always interpretable and interpretable consistently. Then there is a question of how active and responsive is an ontology. And here, I really need to point out one thing, and I'll tell that myself when I send a term request to an ontology that I'm not part of. I'm not curating. Most of the ontologies that are developed in the OBO Foundry are developed by people who have a small lab project or a larger lab project. They might not have funding for this project. And some of the people maintain their ontologies over years and decades, some of them on their own private time. So this is important to understand, that the fact that someone doesn't add a new term in a 48-hour window doesn't mean that the ontology is unresponsive. It might take a week, it might take 2 weeks. But that's certainly, there are questions of what is still an amount of time that's reasonable, and what is an amount of time that's that really takes away the responsiveness entirely. Yeah, and then of course there are prefix chaoses going on that also can affect the interpretability of what's in those ontologies. So the OBO principles are a good thing, but they are also they need interpretation, right? And that has been shown to be a problem. So the interpretation often came down to the community. There are a few of the favorite principles, and I should say that before I forget it towards the end, because I'm super forgetful. I've not created the slides. I had a team of very willing helpers in the OBO Foundry who donated the time to create the slides. I'm completely indebted to them. Björn Peters was one of them, but there's a small group who did those. Many thanks to them. And all incorrectnesses in the presentation today are mine, not theirs. So yeah, the openness is a really favorite principle. The relations are favorite. I already said I'm really very fond of that. And then commitment to collaborations. Yeah, that's also a really important one. We believe that ontologies are not best built in your monastic cell on your own, just thinking deep thoughts. We believe that a good ontology is built with a group of people where everyone has input. And it's always good to, even if you have a group, to ask another group for input, because that is what disseminates good ideas and makes your ideas better. So this is a short slide that shows that the interpretations are not always clear. And the red, if you see the green and this, let's say, beige thing are the principles. You see the red examples that show that people are have very lax interpretations of what is meant, like MIT artistic license. And so these things need to be standardized a little more, and that's what the OBO Foundry is doing now. And the way that the OBO Foundry is doing that is the OBO dashboard, which went live last year, last year in December. This dashboard shows all our OBO Foundry ontologies, and I know this will be hard to see. Each column represents an OBO principle. Each row represents an ontology, and then if the principle is met by the ontology, you get a green field. If the principle is not met, you get a red field. If things are dubious and we need to talk, you know how it is, you get a yellow field. Okay, and I have, if they ask the least technical person to do the presentation, this is going to be training. No, it will be fine. This part I'm going to do from here because otherwise it will be a complete mess. So this is the live dashboard, and you see if you hover over a red field, you get feedback. The ontology IRI is not valid. That is not good. So that needs to be changed. And oops.
Mathias, you sharing the screen?
Oh no, sorry. Yes and no. Okay. Not effectively, but in my thoughts I do. Again.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Asya. I appreciate it. Okay. Here is the live. This is the live dashboard. Let's do this. If you hover over a red field, you see the problem that created the red field. So here you have two multiple definitions, and you have 4 missing definitions. And it says see robot report for details. So let's go to the robo report. I thought that I would get this.
Mathias, what does it mean?
I simply cross. You have see that arrow cross. Probably you need to click that rather than the header. Is the last one? Yes, the last.
Sorry, Asya, I'm sorry. I think you cannot hear the room. Someone was just asking a question. Let me answer that first, and then we'll do the robot report. Okay. So the I here means that there are non-arrow properties used. I think there's some latitude there. This is why it's not a red field yet. This is going to become more consistent. Okay, Asya, thanks so much. What do I need to get to the robot report?
That's it, Jie. I just say go to the summary checkbox, check one, but not the header.
Okay,
the first row. Yeah, first, for example, the last check. Have you seen that? No, not there. Go to the summary. Go to the next row. Not the header. Yeah.
Here.
One more down. Lift it down.
No, there's nothing more. This is the end.
I just say not to the header. Go to the line below. If it doesn't work, yeah.
What do you want to pull?
Okay, but we'll promise next time someone who is technically proficient will do the talk. Trust me, there is a report and you can look at the full report.
Yeah, when we have the free time, we can ask Jay to just click around. But I think I did click around and I did some analysis.
I don't know whether they fix that. I see that they rerun it, but I know there are some issues from for the dashboard for a while.
I think we'll table that discussion before that gets out of hand. Okay, let me go back to the slides. There are a few more slides we want to discuss. And let me change my share back to the slides. And where's my, new share.
Here's another share. Can you say share?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, give me 1 second. Yes.
You say that we should use our own, it's only our own resources.
Yeah, so I mean, this is why it's an I. Let me get back to the microphone. This is why it's an I rather than a red. And I mean, when I say we, that means we, the OBO Foundry ontology. So if you're a rogue ontology developer, you go get them. You do whatever you feel. But if you are an OBO Foundry ontology, the goal is to actually have rho be the locus of authority on relations. And again, I try to explain why I think that is important. I've been in ontology a fair amount of time, and there is a tendency to just create every verb in your language as a relation. That is completely non-fruitful, because then you lose the ability to integrate. So having one locus of authority for relations is, in my mind, excessively meaningful. Right now, I think we get the blue eye just as an information piece. Hey, you're using non-RO RO relations, so it's not red, it's just blue. But ultimately, the goal is to get all the relations in the RO, and that means, for example, we did that with a few ontologies of my own, where we just went through them and submitted those terms to RO, and that really helps it helps both sides, right? You build this one community maintained resource that has all the relations. That means you have more input, more eyes looking at the representation, making sure it's up to standard. Okay. Yeah. Either avoid synonyms or at least provide metadata for them. So and not duplicate representations. Absolutely.
Isn't that a problem?
That's a philosophical question. I'm bad at those. I don't know, because I don't know every metadata vocabulary. It is a problem. I mean, I think we try to solve the problem in actively looking and making sure that many people look at the same thing in questions like, how does that relate to this? And is this understandable? Would this lead to the creation of a duplicate with another label? That is we're trying to control that to the extent possible. It's really hard to do a lot of automatic checks on that, because the way relations are represented in OWL is just not so helpful for that, because we have a limited expressivity in what we can say. Because we only have the characteristics, and not all relations with the same characteristics are representing the same relation. Okay, this is just a few that gives you an idea of how well the criteria are reused now. And you see the thing, I mean, we could go individually over how things are, but I think what's important is you see huge variability. So the red thing, that is relations, I think, or yeah, the red thing I think is relation or openness. That's around 50 in the beginning, but we now have things, maintenance obviously is a concern, and relations is a concern, but other things seem to do quite well, like the common format, I think, and that has improved ever so slightly. So I remember when I started working with the OBO Foundry, you had these 5 or 10 ontologies that didn't use the same format, because there were still ontologies around using OBO edit, another knowledge representation language. So we see slight improvement. We see there's still a lot of variability. and we're really aiming to close the gap and to improve that all over. So the OBO Foundry is still excited and glad to accept new ontologies into the mix, and this is a quick representation of how that works. The ontology representative submits an issue at the OBO Foundry registry GitHub repository, and they request a new ontology. And then the ontology is loaded into a special dashboard that is not publicly visible to just see which principles do you already meet, which principles do you need to work on. Then there is very scientific review process where the OBO Foundry Operations Committee selects a reviewer and they report back to the committee, and the committee takes a vote. If the vote is no, you'll receive feedback. So this is not a situation where it's like, okay, no, and you will never join. It's like, no, we found these things. If you want to work on those issues, that would be great, and we'd be happy to reconsider. So things like those. And yeah. Okay. This is what I said before. This is the dashboard for the new ontology requests. There you see basically no ontology when it comes in is like super perfect. Users is yeah, that's a principle I'm sometimes a little disgruntled with. The many independent users. That is a tricky one. If you start to develop an ontology, you might need it for a project that you're doing. That doesn't mean that you have 400 people across the world using your ontology. You're lucky if you have 400 people somewhere using your tool. But yeah, that's still something that is important to ensure that these ontologies are. What happens if you don't have users? You can see in the bio portal, right? Ontologies are uploaded at a point, and then the people are finished with their PhD, they go on and they, I don't know, become CEOs, and they never look back at the ontology becomes stale, it's still around, people use terms from it, it might degrade into a state of utter chaos, people will still use it. So it's important to show, hey, we're here to stay, there are people who are using this resource. Users also means more collaborators to your ontology development process, which makes your ontology development better. Okay. Now, we have the dashboard, and it's great, and it looks wonderful. But how do we get people to comply with going green, to want to go green? And we don't have only one tool. It's not that we just policy-driven say, well, until you're completely green, you're just not joining. That is a goal, and it's a requirement that will be started in 2024. My understanding is that this will also apply to already existing ontologies, but maybe someone else can dissuade me if that's wrong.
Yeah, it's correct. So actually, the deadline, I think by the end of that year, that all the ontology, including exit one, need to pass dashboard. If not, I think they will mark it or put it probably at the end of the list.
Yep. Yeah, it's not quite. Thanks, Gia. I appreciate it. And sorry that I mistook you before. It's not clear that they will be deleted. They might just get a separate section like the Here Be Dragons area of the OBO Foundry, so to speak. But we also offer training. We have the tools like Robot, and we have carrots. I'm not sure what that means, but so we're trying to engage people to want to do better rather than just only policing that they do better. A lot of effort in meta standards, standardization, we see an intrinsic relation between what the OBO Foundry is doing and what the FAIR principles are asking for. it would be nice to work closer together, and I think some people in our group are working on that, to work together with standardization of efforts such as Fair Impact, OBO, Elixir, Fair is Fair, to influence data management plan requirements of the grant funding organizations in our countries, like in Europe or in the United States or in Brazil for that matter. So this is, and I'm sorry for that, a not quite accurate list of all of the operations committee members. We found that at least one person is missing, that's Bill Houghton, but if you find yourself on the list and you're missing, please accept my, not ontologies, my apologies. And then we'll add you for the next go around. With that, I think I'm finished. Sorry that the demo didn't go. I mean, hands up. Who has seen a demo that went perfectly well in the room? Okay, good. So sorry that I messed up the demo. Okay, well, fair enough. Then questions, comments, concerns. Stefan, if I could ask you to stand here and talk into the funky microphone.
Yeah, it's really good to see the evolution, and is this still working? Because yesterday there was a problem. Okay. Yeah, and on the one hand, it's impressive that it has grown so much, but on the other hand, I remember the original OBO Foundry criteria, and one criterion was non-overlap. And non-overlap both in domain, for instance, well, human and zebrafish kept quite distinct, which I think not a problem, but on the other hand, non-overlap in terms of semantic categories. For instance, but FMA, anatomy, material entities, then go biological processes, process and so on. And my impression is that this principle was broken very early already, for instance, with OBI, and I think there are good reasons for it. But if you allow this overlap, then you have to manage this overlap. You have to do mappings. You have to see whether two terms which are the same really mean the same. And I just suppose this is a really huge amount of work. Who's doing this? Or is this being done?
Yeah, I'll go first, but maybe Gia has more answers to that. I think that it's true, and there was a paper by Robert Herndorf and Michel Dumontier that showed that the orthogonality and overlap issue was still one existing in the OBO Foundry, so there's no way to deny that that was the case. I think right now there are discussions that I had with people who submit new ontology proposals, and in these, the reviewers also addressed, do we think that this could be part of an existing ontology rather than a new ontology? There are ways to cross-reference, and the checking I think is mostly becoming a legacies issue, because what we didn't discuss a lot today is there is the call to reuse existing classes. And I mean, in the reviews for the OBO Foundry committee, I've seen it multiple times that people said, well, this person creates this class. This sounds like it's basically the same class as this. So if it's different, it needs to make clear how it differs. So this is a common issue. It's maybe not regimented as steadfastly as the principles we looked in here, but it is still an area of concern. So it's not, I would not say that as an idea is out of the window.